My mother sat across the courtroom from me and would not look me in the eye. Her lawyer had just told the judge that she had done the best she could with limited resources. Limited resources. That is what she called it. That is what she called choosing one daughter and throwing the other one away. I was 31 years old, and I had spent my entire life believing I was unwanted, that my mother could not handle 2 children, that giving me to my aunt and uncle was an act of love. But it was not love, it was a choice. And the reason she made that choice was sitting 3 rows behind her in the gallery, wearing a cashmere sweater and pearls, completely unaware that she had a twin sister. My name is Nicole, and this is the story of how I found out I was not an only child, and how the truth came out in the last place anyone expected, a courtroom. Let me go back to the beginning, because this is one of those stories where every detail matters. I was raised by my Aunt Claire and Uncle Robert in a small house in Millbrook, about an hour north of the city. Claire was my mother's older sister. She was kind, quiet, the type of woman who expressed love through acts rather than words. A warm meal on the table, a hand on your shoulder when you were upset, a blanket tucked in tight before bed. Robert worked at the post office. They did not have children of their own. I was told from as early as I can remember that my mother, a woman named Vivian, had given me to Claire and Robert when I was an infant because she was young, single, and could not afford to raise a child. I was told it was a sacrifice. I was told she loved me but had to let me go. I was told not to be angry, and for a long time, I was not angry. I was sad. There is a difference. Angry children act out. Sad children disappear. I was the kind of kid who sat in the back of every classroom, did her homework perfectly, never raised her hand, and hoped that if she was good enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, someone would eventually choose her. Claire and Robert gave me a good life, not luxurious. We did not have much, but I had dinner every night, clean clothes, a library card, and 2 people who showed up to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every graduation. They were my parents in every way that mattered, but there was always a hole, a space where a mother was supposed to be. I filled it with questions I never asked out loud. Why did she give me up? Did she ever think about me? Did she regret it? Was I not enough? I saw Vivian exactly 4 times growing up. She came to visit when I was 5, 8, 12, and 16. Each visit was short, an hour, maybe 2. She brought a gift each time, a stuffed animal, a book, a bracelet, a scarf. She hugged me the way you hug someone you feel obligated to hug. Tight enough to look right, loose enough to mean nothing. She never mentioned another child, not once. In 4 visits over 16 years, she never said the word sister. When I turned to 18, Claire sat me down at the kitchen table and told me something she had been holding for my entire life. Nicole, there is something you need to know. Your mother did not give you up because she could not afford a child. She gave you up because she could not afford 2. I stared at her. 2? You have a twin sister. Her name is Charlotte. Your mother kept her. The room tilted. I remember grabbing the edge of the table because I thought I was going to fall off the chair. Claire told me everything she knew. Vivian had given birth to twin girls. She was 20 years old, broke, and alone. She said she could only care for one. Claire and Robert offered to take both of us. Vivian said no. She wanted to keep one. She chose Charlotte. She chose Charlotte, and she gave me away. Claire said she had begged Vivian to at least tell Charlotte about me when she was old enough to understand. Vivian refused. She told Claire that it would only complicate things, that Charlotte did not need to know, that it was better this way. Better for whom? I used to lie awake at night wondering what the deciding factor was. Was it something physical? Did Charlotte cry less? Did she weigh more? Did she have a stronger grip? Or was it random? Did Vivian close her eyes and point? I spent years torturing myself with those questions. Claire told me to stop. She said it did not matter, but it did matter. When your own mother looks at 2 identical babies and picks the other one, it matters in a way that never fully heals. Growing up, I did not know what Charlotte looked like. I did not know her name until I was 18, but I felt her. I know that sounds strange, but there was always this sensation of incompleteness, like I was a sentence that ended in the middle, like there was a word missing that would make everything make sense. My therapist called it twin wound. I called it the thing that kept me up at night. I became a social worker because of that feeling. I thought if I could help other separated children, maybe the hole inside me would shrink. It did not shrink, but the work gave it purpose. Every time I reunited a sibling pair in the foster system, I felt a small, sharp pain followed by a small, sharp joy, like pressing on a bruise and watching the color change. I handled over 200 cases in 8 years. I reunited 43 sibling groups, 43 families put back together because someone paid attention. And every single time I thought about Charlotte. Every single time. I spent the next 13 years trying to process what I had been told. I went to college on a scholarship. I became a social worker. I worked with foster kids, children in the system, children who had been separated from siblings. The irony was not lost on me. I spent my career reuniting other people's families while my own remained broken. I tried to contact Vivian once when I was 25. I wrote her a letter. I did not ask for money. I did not make demands. I simply asked if we could meet, if I could know Charlotte, if there was room in her life for the daughter she gave away. The letter came back unopened, just like the grandmother's letters in that other story. The world is full of envelopes that come back unopened, full of people on the other side who are too afraid or too proud to read what is inside. When I was 29, Claire was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She was 63. Within a year, she did not recognize me. Robert had passed 5 years before that. A heart attack while shoveling snow. So it was just me and the slowly disappearing woman who had raised me. The medical bills were enormous. Claire had some savings, but not nearly enough for full-time memory care. I spent everything I had. I sold my car. I moved into a smaller apartment. I worked overtime. I applied for every assistance program I could find. Then I discovered something. Vivian had money, not just a little, a lot. Her second husband, a man named Gregory Patterson, was a successful real estate developer. Vivian lived in a large home in the suburbs. Charlotte had gone to private school, then a prestigious university, fully paid. Vivian drove a new car every 2 years. She took vacations to Europe, and the daughter she kept, Charlotte, lived 10 minutes from Vivian in a house that Gregory had helped them buy. Meanwhile, the daughter she gave away was choosing between groceries and her aunt's medication. I did not want revenge. I want to be very clear about that. I did not file a lawsuit because I was bitter. I filed it because Claire was dying, and I could not afford to keep her alive. And the woman who brought me into this world had the means to help and had chosen not to, the same way she had chosen 31 years ago. I filed a suit for parental responsibility and emotional damages. My lawyer, a woman named Diane Reyes, who took the case pro bono after hearing my story, argued that Vivian had a legal and moral obligation that she had abandoned. She cited case law around parental neglect, emotional harm, and the financial disparity between how the two children were raised. Vivian's attorney, a man named Thomas Grant, was expensive and confident. He argued that Vivian had made a legal, voluntary placement with a family member, that there was no neglect because I was cared for, that Vivian had no ongoing obligation. My client did the best she could with limited resources. He said she ensured both children were raised in loving homes. Limited resources, like she was splitting a sandwich instead of splitting her children. The first hearing was procedural. Arguments were filed. Dates were set. Nothing dramatic. The real hearing was 5 weeks later. I showed up with Diane. Vivian showed up with Grant. And in the gallery, sitting in the third row, was a woman I had never seen in person but recognized immediately. Charlotte. She looked like me. Not identical. We were fraternal twins, but close enough that it was like looking into a mirror from a slightly different angle. Same jaw, same eyes, same way of tilting her head when she was listening. She did not know who I was. She was there to support her mother. She thought this was a frivolous lawsuit from a distant relative trying to get money. Diane presented our case. She walked through the timeline. The birth, the separation, the 4 visits in 16 years. The letter returned unopened. The financial disparity, Charlotte's private school versus my public school, Charlotte's paid-for house versus my sold car and empty savings account. She presented Claire's medical records, the Alzheimer's diagnosis, the bills. Then she presented the hospital records from the day we were born. Twin girls, born 4 minutes apart. Mother, Vivian Ellis. Baby A, Charlotte. Baby B, Nicole. The courtroom was quiet, but one person in the gallery was not quiet. Charlotte was staring at the screen where the birth records were displayed. Her mouth was open. Her face was pale. Diane continued. She asked the judge to consider the emotional harm of being separated from a twin sibling without consent or knowledge. She submitted psychological evaluations. She submitted testimony from experts on twin separation and its long-term effects. Then she did something that changed the temperature of the entire room. She turned to the gallery and said, "Your Honor, I would like to call attention to the fact that Charlotte Patterson is present in this courtroom, and based on our conversations with the defendant's family members, we believe Charlotte was never told she had a twin sister." Grant objected. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the legal claim." The judge overruled. She looked at Charlotte. "Ma'am, is this true? Were you aware that you had a twin sister?" Charlotte stood up slowly. She looked at Vivian, then at me. then back at Vivian. "No," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "She told me I was an only child." Vivian closed her eyes. "My entire life," Charlotte said, louder now. "You told me I was an only child. Every birthday, every Christmas. Every time I asked why I did not have siblings, you said it just was not meant to be." Her voice cracked. "She was meant to be. She was always meant to be. You just did not want her." Vivian's lawyer tried to intervene. Charlotte ignored him. She stepped out of the gallery row, walked down the center aisle, and stopped in front of my table. She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were red. Mine were too. "Are you Nicole?" "Yes, I am Charlotte." "I know." She sat down next to me, right there at the defendant's table. Vivian's own daughter, sitting with the woman suing her. The judge paused the proceedings. She asked both attorneys to approach. They conferred quietly for several minutes. When they returned, Grant looked shaken. He said, "Your Honor, my client would like to request a recess to discuss a potential settlement." The judge granted it. During the recess, Charlotte and I sat on a bench in the hallway. We did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "I always felt like something was missing, like there was a space next to me that should have been filled. I used to tell my therapist I felt like half a person." I started crying. I felt the same way. My whole life, she took my hand, a stranger who shared my blood and my birthday and nothing else. And somehow sitting there, I felt more whole than I had ever felt. The case settled. Vivian agreed to cover Claire's medical expenses in full. She also agreed to establish a trust for me, equal to what she had given Charlotte over the years. The total was significant, more than I had ever seen. But that was not what mattered. What mattered was Charlotte. We talk every day now. She calls me every morning. I call her every night. We are making up for 31 years of silence, one conversation at a time. She came to visit Claire with me last month. Claire did not recognize either of us, but when Charlotte held her hand, Claire smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than memory. Vivian and I do not speak. Charlotte sees her occasionally, but the relationship is strained. Some things cannot be forgiven with a check. Some choices leave marks that no amount of money can cover. But I am not angry anymore. I was sad for 31 years, and now I am something else. I am found. I have a sister. I have a mirror. I have someone who calls me every morning just to say, "Good morning, other half." If you are listening to this and you were separated from a sibling, or you suspect there is a part of your family you were never told about, please do not let fear keep you quiet. The truth is not always comfortable, but it is always worth knowing, because somewhere out there might be a person who feels like half of themselves, waiting for you to make them whole. His lawyer called me a gold digger. He said it calmly, like he was reading off a grocery list. "Your Honor, this woman targeted a wealthy elderly client, manipulated his trust, and now she is trying to claim property that rightfully belongs to the family." I was sitting at the table in my nursing scrubs because I had come straight from a 12-hour shift. I did not have time to change. I did not have a lawyer. I did not have anyone. All I had was the truth and a voicemail that a dead woman left on my phone 11 months ago. My name is Rosa. I am 34 years old. I am a home health aide. I've been doing this work for 9 years. It is the kind of work that nobody thanks you for. You show up at someone's house at 6 in the morning. You help them out of bed. You make breakfast. You check their blood pressure, sort their pills, change bandages, clean wounds that nobody else wants to look at. You do it for 10, 11, 12 hours. Then you drive home and do laundry and eat something cold because you are too tired to cook. I got assigned to Margaret Lawson when she was 81. She had stage 4 lung cancer. She had been given 6 months, maybe 8. Her husband, Richard, was 84. He was still sharp mentally, but his body was failing. Bad knees, bad hips. He could not take care of Margaret alone. They had 2 sons, Bradley and Keith, who lived about 40 minutes away. They visited maybe once a month, sometimes less. They always looked uncomfortable, like they were counting the minutes until they could leave. They never asked me how their parents were doing. They never asked Margaret what she needed. They came, sat in the living room for an hour, talked about their own lives, and left. I was there every day. For 8 months I was there. Margaret was a remarkable woman. Even as the cancer took her body apart, piece by piece, her mind stayed sharp and her humor stayed intact. She called me Rosie, even though nobody else in my life calls me that. She asked about my daughter, Elena, who was 7 at the time. She remembered Elena's school play and asked me how it went. She remembered my birthday and had Richard buy me flowers, even though she could barely sit up. One night, about 3 months before she passed, Margaret asked me to sit with her. Richard had gone to bed early. The house was quiet. She took my hand and said something I will never forget. "Rosa, my boys do not come. You know that. I know that. Richard pretends not to notice, but he cries at night when he thinks I am asleep. When I am gone, he is going to be alone. And those boys are going to swoop in and take everything and put him in a facility and sell this house before the flowers on my grave have wilted. She squeezed my hand. I need you to promise me something. When I am gone, do not leave Richard. Stay with him. Take care of him the way you have taken care of me. Please, I promised. Margaret passed on a Sunday morning in April. I was holding one hand. Richard was holding the other. The hospice nurse said it was peaceful. I do not think death is ever peaceful for the people left in the room. But Margaret went quietly, and that was enough. I kept my promise. I stayed with Richard. His insurance covered part of my hours, and I supplemented the rest by picking up extra shifts with other clients on my days off. Richard and I settled into a routine. I came every morning. I made his coffee. I drove him to his appointments. I sat with him in the evenings while he watched old westerns on television. He did not talk much, but he liked having someone in the room. About 5 months after Margaret died, Richard called me into the kitchen one morning. He was sitting at the table with a manila folder and a pen. "Rosa, I want to change my will." I said, "Richard, that is none of my business. I am making it your business. Margaret asked me to take care of you, and I intend to keep that promise." He told me he was leaving me the house. Not all the money, not the investments, just the house where I had taken care of his wife for 8 months and taken care of him for 5. He said Bradley and Keith would get everything else, the savings, the investments, the life insurance. But the house was for me. I told him not to. I told him his sons would be furious. I told him it would cause problems. He looked at me and said, "Rosa, my sons have not carried a single box, changed a single bandage, or made a single meal in this house in 3 years. You have. This is my decision." He changed the will. His attorney, a woman named Janet Silvera, handled it. She made sure it was airtight. Richard passed 8 months later. Pneumonia that turned into something worse. I was there, like always. The night Richard passed, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. When Margaret was alive, even the silence had a texture to it. The hum of her oxygen machine, the rustle of Richard adjusting her blankets, the low murmur of the television. Now it was just empty. I washed the dishes. I folded a towel that did not need folding. I stood at the window and looked at Margaret's garden, lit by the porch light, and I talked to her. I kept my promise. I said. I stayed. The next morning, Bradley and Keith came to the house, not to grieve, to inventory. Bradley walked through the rooms with his phone out, taking pictures of furniture. Keith opened drawers and looked through paperwork. Neither of them asked me how I was. Neither of them asked how their father had spent his final hours. Keith looked at me at one point and said, "You can leave now. We will handle things from here." I picked up my bag and walked to the door. Then I turned around and said, "Your mother wanted me to tell you something. She said you should be ashamed of yourselves." Keith blinked. Bradley stopped taking pictures. I left. 3 weeks later, I got served. 3 weeks after the funeral, I got served. Bradley and Keith were contesting the will. Their attorney, Martin Vogt, argued that I had exerted undue influence over a grieving, elderly man, that I had isolated him from his family, that I had manipulated him into changing his will to benefit myself. Every word was a lie, but lies in a courtroom do not always sound like lies. Sometimes they sound like common sense. A home health aide who inherits a house. Of course she manipulated him. Of course. I could not afford a lawyer. I went to the hearing alone, in my scrubs, because I had been at work until 45 minutes before. Vogt presented his case. He was polished. He used words like vulnerable, isolated, predatory. He painted a picture of a lonely old man tricked by his caretaker. Then the judge turned to me. "Do you have anything to present?" I said, "Your Honor, I have one thing." I pulled out my phone. I opened the voicemail app and I played a message that Margaret Lawson had left on my phone 11 months ago, 3 days before she died. The courtroom heard Margaret's voice, thin, weak, but clear. "Rosa, it is Margaret. I know I do not have much time left, and I want to say this while I still can. You have been more family to Richard and me than our own sons have been in years. You held my hand when I was scared. You made me laugh when I wanted to give up. You treated me with dignity every single day, and I will never be able to repay you for that." She paused. I could hear her breathing. "Richard is going to change his will. I asked him to. The house is for you, Rosa. Not because you asked for it, because you earned it, because you showed up. Every single day you showed up, and my boys did not." Another pause. "If anyone tries to take this from you, play them this message and tell them Margaret Lawson said they should be ashamed of themselves." The voicemail ended. The courtroom was silent. Bradley was looking at the floor. Keith had his hand over his mouth. Vogt stood up and said quietly, "Your Honor, we would like to request a continuance to discuss with our clients." The judge looked at him. "I think we have heard enough." She ruled in my favor. The will stood. The house was mine. After the hearing, Bradley stopped me in the hallway. He did not apologize. He just said, "She really said that? My mother really said that?" "She did." He stood there for a moment. Then he walked away. I still live in that house. Elena has her own room now. Margaret's garden is in the backyard. I water it every morning, the same way the nurse in that other story waters Harold's garden. I think there is something about gardens and the people we lose. They keep growing even after the hands that planted them are gone. On the mantel next to a photo of Richard and Margaret on their wedding day, I put a small framed note. It says, "She showed up every single day." It is not a quote from anyone famous. It is just the truth. And sometimes the truth is the most powerful thing you can put on a wall. I sat in that courtroom holding a plastic bag from the hospital. Inside it were the clothes I was wearing when they pulled me out of the river. A torn jacket, one shoe, my wallet, still damp. That was everything I owned in the world. Across from me sat my stepdaughter, Harper, and her lawyer. Harper was 26 years old, and she was suing me for the house, the car, and every dollar her father left behind. Her father, my husband, had been dead for 3 weeks, and she was telling the judge I did not deserve a single thing. My name is Elaine. I am 47 years old, and 3 weeks before that hearing, I almost died. Let me back up. I married David Moreno when I was 42. He was 58. It was the second marriage for both of us. My first husband left me for someone younger when I was 37. I spent 5 years alone, working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in an apartment that was too quiet and too empty. I had convinced myself that love was something that happened to other people. Then I met David at a farmer's market. He was buying tomatoes. I was buying bread. He asked me if I knew how to tell when a tomato was ripe, and I said no, and he spent 10 minutes teaching me. And by the end of it, I was laughing harder than I had laughed in years. David was kind in a way that did not ask for anything in return. He opened doors. He remembered things I said 3 conversations ago. He called me every morning at 7:15 just to say, "Good morning." He was not perfect. He snored. He was terrible at loading the dishwasher. He left his socks everywhere. But he loved me like I was the most important person in the world. And after 5 years of feeling invisible, that meant everything. We got married 6 months after we met. Small ceremony. His daughter Harper was not there. She refused to come. She told David I was after his money. David was not rich. He owned a modest house, had a pension from 30 years of teaching high, school history, and a savings account with about $180,000. Comfortable, not wealthy, but Harper saw me as a threat. She was cold to me from the start. Short answers, canceled dinners. She once told David in front of me that he was making a fool of himself. David tried to bridge the gap. He invited her to every holiday. He called her every week. He never stopped trying. Harper never warmed up. But David and I built a good life anyway. 5 years of morning phone calls and Saturday errands and Sunday crossword puzzles. 5 years of being seen. Then about a month ago, David and I were driving home from a weekend trip. It was raining. A truck crossed the center line on a 2-lane road. David swerved. The car went through the guardrail and into the river below. I remember the cold. I remember the water coming in through the broken windshield. I remember reaching for David's hand and finding it. I remember pulling at his seatbelt and it would not release. I remember him looking at me and saying, "Go, Elaine, go." I did not want to go, but the water was rising and David pushed me toward the broken window and I went through it. The current pulled me downstream. Someone on the bridge saw me and called 911. They pulled me out 200 yards downriver, hypothermic, with a broken collarbone and 3 cracked ribs. David did not make it out. They recovered his body the next morning. I will tell you something about grief that nobody prepares you for. It is not the big moments that break you. It is the small ones. It is reaching for the phone at 7:15 to call someone who will never answer again. It is buying 2 coffees out of habit and standing in the kitchen holding the extra one, not knowing what to do with it. It is hearing a song on the radio that he used to sing badly in the car and laughing for half a second before you remember. David used to do this thing every Sunday morning. He would get up before me, make 2 cups of coffee, and bring them to bed with the crossword puzzle. He would read the clues out loud and I would shout answers from under the covers. We were terrible at crosswords. We never finished one, but we tried every week for 5 years. The Sunday after the accident, I woke up and reached for the coffee cup that was not there. And that is when it hit me. Not the car, not the river, not the cold, just the absence of a warm cup on the nightstand and a voice reading clues I did not know the answer to. That is what grief is. It is not one big wave. It is 1,000 small absences that accumulate until the weight of everything that is missing becomes heavier than everything that remains. Harper did not come to the hospital. She did not come to the funeral. The first time I saw her after David died was in that courtroom, sitting next to her lawyer, trying to take the house where her father's crossword puzzle was still on the table. I spent 4 days in the hospital. I did not eat. I barely spoke. The nurses were kind. They brought me warm blankets and said things like, "You are a survivor, and he would want you to keep going." I know they meant well, but none of them knew David. None of them knew what I had lost. When I was discharged, I went home to an empty house. David's coffee mug was still in the sink. His crossword puzzle was still on the kitchen table, half finished. His reading glasses were on the nightstand. Everything was exactly where he left it, and he was never coming back. 3 days later, I got served. Harper was contesting David's will. He had left everything to me: the house, the savings, the pension. Harper was named as the secondary beneficiary, meaning she would inherit only if I was not alive. Standard language for a married couple. Harper argued that the will was outdated, that David had intended to change it, that I had influenced him into leaving her out. Her attorney, a man named Julian Price, filed an emergency motion to freeze all assets pending the hearing. I had no money to hire a lawyer. Everything was frozen. I was living in a house I might lose, wearing clothes neighbors had donated because mine were at the bottom of a river. The hearing was set for 3 weeks after the accident. I showed up with a plastic hospital bag and a folder of papers David kept in his desk drawer. Price went first. He argued that Harper, as David's only biological child, had a moral and legal right to her father's estate. He argued that David and I had only been married 5 years and that the estate should be divided. He painted me as an outsider who had inserted herself into David's life and isolated him from his daughter. Isolated him. David called Harper every single week. She was the one who stopped picking up. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Moreno, do you have representation?" "No, Your Honor. My accounts are frozen. I cannot afford an attorney. Do you have anything to present?" I opened the folder from David's desk. Inside were several things. The first was a letter David had written and signed, dated 6 months before the accident. It was addressed to Harper. "Dear Harper, I'm writing this because I know that if anything happens to me, you will try to take the house from Elaine. I know you do not like her. I know you think she is with me for the money, but I need you to hear this. Elaine is the best thing that ever happened to me. She makes me laugh. She holds my hand when I'm scared. She is the reason I get up in the morning. I am leaving everything to her because she earned it, not with money, with love. I hope one day you understand that love is not a competition. There is enough for everyone. I love you, Harper, but I love her too, and that does not make my love for you any less." "Dad," I read it out loud. My voice broke 3 times, but I finished it. The courtroom was quiet. The second document was David's updated will, signed and notarized 6 months before the accident. It confirmed everything he had written in the letter, everything to me. Harper as secondary beneficiary, clean, legal, airtight. The third thing was not a document. It was David's phone, which had been recovered from the car in a waterproof case that somehow survived. I had unlocked it at home the week before. His last text message, sent to Harper the morning of the accident, read, "Hey sweetheart, heading home from our trip. I love you. Call me when you get a chance." She never responded. I showed the judge the text. Then I showed him the call log. 47 outgoing calls from David to Harper in the last 6 months. 3 were answered. 3 out of 47. Price asked for a recess. The judge denied it. The judge ruled in my favor. The will stood. The assets were unfrozen. The house, the savings, the pension, all mine, as David intended. After the hearing, Harper stood in the hallway. She was not crying. She looked empty, like someone who had just realized that the story she told herself for 5 years, that I was the villain, that her father was a fool, that she was the one being wronged, was not true. None of it was true. I walked over to her. I should have been angry. I had every right to be angry. This woman had tried to take everything from me 3 weeks after I watched her father die. But I thought about David, about what he would want, about the letter he wrote. Love is not a competition. There is enough for everyone. I said, "Harper, your father loved you. He called you every week. He never stopped. And there is a place for you in that house whenever you are ready." She did not respond. She just turned and walked away. That was 2 months ago. She has not called, but I have not changed the locks. And David's letter is still on the kitchen table, right next to his unfinished crossword puzzle. The door is open. It will stay open. If you are listening to this, and you are holding a grudge against someone your parent chose to love, please hear me. Your parents' love for someone else is not a subtraction from their love for you. It is an addition. There is room at the table for everyone. And if you wait too long to sit down, you might find that the person who set your place is gone. Do not wait. Sit down. The chair is still there.